The air in the hut is thick with the scent of roasted meat and the metallic tang of dried blood. Priam, king of Troy, is on his knees in the dust of the Greek camp. He does not reach for a sword. Instead, his aged, trembling fingers wrap around the massive, gore-stained hands of the man who slaughtered his sons. He stares up into the cold, sun-bright eyes of the warrior Achilles. One word from the son of Peleus, and the old king dies. One flicker of rage, and the ransom of Troy is lost to the flames. Can a father's broken heart bridge the chasm of a decade of slaughter, or will the divine fury of Achilles consume the last hope of a dying city? The plains of Troy had become a wasteland of ash and salt, where the honor of kings died in the mud. For 9 years the walls of Ilium held, but the 10th year brought a darkness that no stone could bar. Hector was dead. The breaker of horses, the pillar of the city, had fallen beneath the walls, his throat pierced by the ashen spear of Achilles. But death was not enough for the Greek champion. Vengeance had turned into a desecration that horrified even the gods. The war had moved beyond the limits of mortal mercy. For 12 days, Achilles had dragged Hector's body behind his chariot, circling the tomb of his fallen lover Patroclus, until the prince's flesh was a mask of dust and bone. The gods looked down from Olympus with a growing sickness in their immortal hearts. Even the sun seemed to pale at the sight of such unyielding malice. Troy wept, not just for a fallen prince, but for the loss of the laws of men. The gods decreed that this madness must end. Iris, the wind-footed messenger, descended through the clouds to the palace of Priam. She found the king shrouded in his robes, sitting in the dirt of his inner courtyard, his head covered in the filth of the earth. She spoke a command that defied all mortal reason. Priam must go alone to the Greek ships. He must carry a ransom to the tent of the man who hated him. Hecuba, his queen, wailed in terror, calling it a journey to the grave. She saw only the lion's den, the blood-slicked sand, and the merciless temper of Achilles. She begged him to stay within the safety of the walls, fearing the Greek would tear him apart. But Priam felt a pull stronger than the fear of death. A king's duty is to his people, but a father's duty is to the spirit of his fallen son. Priam would not allow Hector's soul to wander the banks of the Styx, denied the peace of the pyre. Preparation was not a matter of armor, but of ritual and heavy silence. He descended into his high-roofed treasure chamber, scented with cedar. He chose 12 exquisite robes, 12 single-fold cloaks, and 10 talents of pure gold. He took the magnificent cup given to him by the Thracians, a treasure he prized above all others, for the wagon. He did not call for his remaining sons with affection, but with the sharp, bitter tongue of a man who has seen his best fruit withered on the vine. He poured a libation of dark wine to Zeus, praying for a sign. An eagle, the black hunter, soared over the city on the right, its wingspan casting a shadow over the Scaean gate. This was the omen. As the mule cart creaked toward the Greek lines, a stranger appeared. Hermes, the guide, appeared in the guise of a young soldier, his first beard just darkening his chin. "Fear not, old father," the god whispered, his voice like the rustle of dry leaves. "I will lead you where the sentries cannot see." Priam clutched the golden cup, the symbol of his last earthly power, and followed the stranger into the mouth of the enemy. Hermes breathed asleep upon the guards, their heads dropping like lead. The massive bolt of the Greek gate, which usually required 3 men to move, slid back at the god's touch with a sound like a dying groan. Priam stepped into the firelight. Achilles sat at a table, his companions moving to serve him. The room went silent. It was as if a ghost had walked into the hall of the living. Priam did not hesitate. He moved with a speed born of desperation, sinking to the floor. He took the hands that had broken his lineage and pressed his lips to them. Achilles recoiled, his muscles tensing, his hand reaching instinctively for the hilt of the sword that lay nearby. The air in the hut crackled with the threat of immediate slaughter. The Myrmidons froze, waiting for the spray of blood. But the old king spoke, his voice thin as parchment, invoking the memory of the one person the Greek warrior still loved. "Remember your father, Achilles," Priam whispered. "He is aged like me, standing on the threshold of a sorrowful old age. Perhaps even now his neighbors press him hard, and there is no one to ward off ruin. But he, at least, hears that you are alive, and his heart rejoices. I am altogether wretched. I fathered the best sons in broad Troy, and not one of them is left to me. I endure what no man should." Achilles looked down at the white hair of the king. He saw not an enemy, but a reflection of the grief that awaited his own father Peleus, back in the halls of Phthia. He saw the inevitability of his own death, which he knew was coming soon beneath these very walls. The fury that had sustained him, the red mist that had clouded his vision since Patroclus died, suddenly broke like a fever. He moved the king's hand away. The struggle was no longer between two warriors, but between the weight of their shared humanity and the cruelty of the world they inhabited. Achilles stood and wept. He wept for his father, whom he would never see again, and he wept for Patroclus, whose ghost still haunted his dreams. Priam wept at his feet, huddled in a ball, his cries for Hector filling the corners of the room. The sound was elemental, the sound of breaking. There was no strategy here, only the raw truth of the spear path. Achilles raised the king from the ground and spoke of the two jars that sit on the doorsill of Zeus. One jar is filled with evils, and the other with blessings. No man walks this earth without sorrow. We must endure it, though our hearts are breaking, for mourning gets us nowhere in the cold end. The realization changed the war into a test of fate. The silence that followed was no longer the silence of tension, but of shared grief. Achilles personally supervised the washing of Hector's body. He ordered his servants to wrap the prince in fine tunics so that Priam would not see the marks of the dragging and be moved to a fresh rage. He was protecting the king from his own temper. He even shared a meal with Priam, lamb and wine, honoring the ancient laws of hospitality. They looked at each other with a strange, dark wonder. Priam marveled at the godlike stature and beauty of the man who had ruined him, and Achilles marveled at the iron-willed courage of the father who had dared the Greek camp alone. The immediate conflict was over. The ransom was accepted. But both men knew the truce was a fragile bridge over a river of fire. They had found peace in the heart of war. In the grey light before dawn, Hermes woke the king. "Do not sleep among the wolves, old man," the god warned. Priam climbed onto the wagon, the body of Hector laid carefully upon the golden rugs, shrouded in the robes of his ancestors. They moved through the sleeping camp, past the silent ships and the cold embers of the watchfires. When they reached the ford of the river, Hermes vanished into the morning mist. As the wagon approached the gates of Troy, Cassandra stood on the high citadel. She first saw the glint of the king's white hair and the dark shape of the bier. Her cry pierced the morning air, a jagged sound that brought the city to the walls. The women of Troy threw themselves upon the body, their lamentations rising like smoke into the wind. The price of the ransom was paid, and the long mourning had begun. Priam had saved the body, but he had seen the end of his world. He had looked into the eyes of the man who would soon ensure that Troy fell. He had bought 12 days of peace with gold and tears. He had done what no other mortal had ever done. He had kissed the hand of his son's murderer. History remembers him for his tragic end, but he found the strength to remain human. But another shadow is rising. A clever man from Ithaca begins to dream of a gift made of timber and deceit. The war is not yet over. Walk with us through the old stories. Subscribe to Saga Weaver, where ancient warriors face impossible choices.